She went carnivore. Within 1 month, her joint stopped dislocating. She was able to start exercising. She lost like 40 pounds and is thriving. That's the real thing. We're talking this make America healthy again. The only way Americans get healthy is if they want to themselves. The pills are not the answer.
Dr. Shawn Baker is an orthopedic surgeon and the best-selling author of the Carnivore Diet.
He has helped millions of people fix chronic disease and lose fat, and it's easy to get the same results.
And the narrative is you can never overcome obesity. It is a disease, and the only way you can deal with it is to take drugs for the rest of your life. But the reality is it's not. I see it all the time. People that lose hundreds of pounds and they maintain. I can't imagine how many people I've met that said, hey, I used to be 400 pounds. And you look at them, they're 150 pounds normal. And I'm eating carnivore. I'm eating close to carnivore. I'm at the point where I think good nutrition will impact every single health situation, whether acute or chronic, whether genetic or not.
Do you think everyone has to do high-fat carnivore?
No, I don't. I think females tend to do slightly better on higher fat than men as a general rule. You can actually gain weight while being in ketosis. I mean, it's not necessarily, the magic metric, and sometimes it's distracting.
Let's play a game. How to get faster carnivore results. I've got some food here, and you tell me, is this good or is this bad for carnivore results?
Okay, let's see what we got. Yeah.
Ribeye.
Ribeye, I would give it 10. If I had a bunch of ribeye steaks and liver in front of me, I'm going to choose ribeye steaks 100 times out of 100. Honestly, I would never pick the liver.
LDL cholesterol, you mentioned cholesterol, but LDL, that kind of increases. Is that a worry or a concern?
It can be. Yeah, I mean, it depending on how much it increases.
This episode features Dr. Shawn Baker, and we're discussing his top tips for you to get faster carnivore results, whether that's healing, getting more energy, and even weight loss. Now, if you're new to carnivore and you would like expert support from medical doctors like Dr. Shawn Baker, I'd like to personally invite you to join our Go Carnivore community. You can speak to any of our carnivore doctors and coaches and get the support that you need. Plus, join our monthly challenges. Just head to gocarnivore.com and start your free 90-day challenge. And now for the episode with Dr. Shawn Baker. Dr. Baker, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure chatting with you.
Now, you are often referred to as the godfather of the carnivore diet, and you wrote a best-selling book, The Carnivore Diet, and millions of people have reversed chronic health conditions like heart failure, thyroid issues, and they've even lost hundreds of pounds. And that's because they are doing 3 things right on the carnivore diet. So today, Dr. Shawn Baker is going to share his extensive research and experience. We're going to talk about all your most asked questions: red meat, cholesterol, gut health. We're also going to talk about how you can get faster carnivore results and the top foods that you need to eat. So Dr. Baker, my first question: there is a lot of pushback when it comes to the carnivore diet. People say that it is deadly, it's going to kill you, it is dangerous. As a top carnivore doctor and expert, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, the reality is we just don't know. That's the best answer I can have. I mean, I can say that present health often predicts future health. And the way I approach a carnivore diet, for most people it is a therapeutic option. It's a therapeutic tool, and it's undeniably has been widely successful for a whole variety of conditions, everything from autoimmune conditions to diabetes to other metabolic diseases to inflammatory conditions, even some genetic diseases, believe it or not, seem to respond, like Ehlers-Danlos and what have you. I think that when it comes to making predictions about longevity and disease, long-term disease risk, it's really, really hard to do. And I think the people that speculate are really just doing that. They're speculating. They're looking at, and there's also a difference between practicing medicine based on population data versus individual, a more personalized approach where there's nuance, where, there's multiple variables to consider. And I think for the people that I've talked to that have used a carnivore diet successfully to put, whatever disease it might be into remission, any concerns about long-term things are in their mind worth it. It's kind of like, my life was literally a living hell, or it was just, a very unbearable existence. And now I'm freed from that for the first time in maybe decades. And then you tell them that, no, you can't do that because we think that maybe in 30 years you might get heart disease or something. That's at best speculative. I think as we get more data on this stuff, I think we'll find that there is some nuance around this. And I know currently there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of back and forth about this. And the real answer is it's going to take a while to figure this stuff out. But in the meantime, as a physician, I am very much concerned about the sick patient in front of me can I make them not sick? Not if they're going to live to 100, because that's nice, but it's not the primary role of a physician, nor should it be the primary role of an unhealthy person. Their job number one is to get healthy, and then from there you can continue to do whatever you need to do that aligns with your goals. But step number one, get healthy. Carnivore, I will say, unequivocally does that for many, many, many people. That's clear, as you've probably noticed and experienced, and have seen those results both personally and vicariously through other people.
Absolutely. I think it's very easy because we're both carnivore. You've been doing it for nearly, I think, 10 years. I've been doing it for about 5 years. I do a higher fat version of carnivore, and it's helped me heal so many things. We both have a community, and it's just incredible how many people have healed chronic diseases, losing weight, all these different things, and millions of people have got so much benefit. It would be good to understand the mechanism by which carnivore diet works in the body. Could you explain that?
Yeah, well, I mean, likely there are many mechanisms by which this is working. Number one is just stop poisoning yourself. I mean, the modern food supply is literally, it's kind of funny. A lot of people say, well, carnivore diet is a form of an eating disorder. I would say that the standard diet is an eating disorder, quite honestly, because you're literally consuming poison regularly. It's obviously harming you, and yet you continue to do that merely because it either tastes good to you and you become addicted to it, or because of price considerations. And so that, to me, is really an eating disorder, if you ask me. So removing the clearly harmful foods from your diet, and I think meat in particular is not harmful food. I think it's incredibly good nutrition. So, and that's part of it. What do you replace it with? Do you replace it with cardboard? Yeah, I mean, you're going to gain less weight if you eat cardboard. And I'm using the term cardboard, a little, humorously, but meat provides very highly satiating but highly bioavailable nutrition to us, and so that helps with some of the obesity issues we see. It helps with making sure that we are well nourished. I do think that the gut is a primary starting point for many, many diseases. This goes back, I guess, to the time of Hippocrates, when they said all disease began in the gut, and I do think there's a lot of truth to that. Our gut is our largest interface from a surface area standpoint with the outside world. Many people don't realize, but the inside of our gut, like our mouth, our esophagus, stomach, intestines, are actually outside of our body. It's like if you took a donut, that hole in the donut is still outside the donut, and that's how we are. We're like a giant, long, stretched out donut with the hole in the end, the hole being our digestive tract. And that, because the digestive tract has so many little we call villi. These are little corrugations or little ridges, millions and millions, and then microvilli on top of that. The surface area is estimated to be about the size of a tennis court. And not only that, because people think about their skin being the biggest interface with the environment, but the skin is actually designed to primarily keep things out. We're waterproof, we're, all those things. Now, the gut is not designed that way. If the gut was like our skin, then we would all starve to death because we could not take things in. So our gut is actually designed to take things in. And that's why, because it's such a large interface with the outside world, about 70% of our immune system resides along our gut, and all these things, Peyer's patches and other things that are along the gut. And so when that membrane, or that barrier that selectively lets food and lets in nutrients and water and other things that are important for our well-being, becomes compromised in any way due to, chemicals, irritants, whatever it might be, medication sometimes, then we have this influx of foreign particles that are not supposed to be there, and they're irritants, and they set up inflammatory reactions and autoimmune reactions and so on and so forth. And so I think the carnivore diet often remedies that, as I mentioned, some of the other things about the nutrition and just the general removal of high calorie, low nutrition, hyper palatable, highly addictive foods. And there are, we could talk about the individual nutrients, of which there are. Meat, for most people don't realize that beef is estimated to have something like 70,000, 70, with 3 zeros after that, 70,000 unique nutritional compounds, the vast majority of which we have no idea what they do. I mean, of course, we know about, amino acids and fats and, iron and zinc and, some of the vitamins, B vitamins and whatnot. But there are, I start naming them all, carnosine, carnitine, creatine, anserine, and on and on and on and on. And we also have phytonutrients, that are there. People are talking about, oh, you have to have phytonutrients. Well, guess what? When a cow eats plants, and a cow can consume way, way, way more things than we can consume. They can, eat all these, they can eat grass, they can eat leaves, they can eat flowers, they just go through fields and mow everything down. And, you know, many of those things would be harmful to us, but the cow can absorb those nutrients. They can take that up. It's sequestered in its tissues. And then when we consume that, we get to consume that as well. And it's not tied up in fiber. It's more bioavailable. So this sort of criticism that there's no phytonutrients in meat is actually without merit, because there is. And cows, again, and you know, cows can, depending on how the cow is raised, I mean, it can be out in the mountains chewing on mountain flowers and all this stuff, and they have a bigger diversity. But even a cow that's raised, you know, in a regular pasture and then finished off on some, you know, mixed grain and forage, still has quite a bit of phytonutrient in it.
So it seems like there's many mechanisms by which the carnivore diet works. Gut health is a big one. I want to talk about some things that people say about gut health and the gut microbiome a bit later. I want to center on red meat because that seems to be the bulk of a carnivore diet. Now, do you think it's healthy to eat a lot of red meat, that being 80 to 90% of your diet? For some people, including you, it's 100% of your diet. Is that entirely healthy long term?
Well, I mean, again, I would speculate. I mean, I can't know for sure, but you know, so, you know, as to the fact that, I can speak to my personal experience, and in reality, my diet is about 95% red meat, because I'll eat some eggs from time to time, I'll have some fish from time to time, but by and large, I'm eating steaks and red meat every day, and I do every day. Um, I think it's healthy as long as it is. I mean, I think this is the way to look at that. I mean, if you are, um, and I think health is defined by more than your diet. I mean, I think that one of the misconceptions is, and many people have this, is a carnivore diet is an excuse to eat unlimited amounts of food as much as you want, and you'll never gain a pound, and you'll always be lean, and you'll always be healthy. I don't think that's true. I think that, there is a limit, and some people do exceed that. Some people don't lose weight. Some people gain weight. Majority don't. Majority don't, as you know. The majority get healthier and they lose weight and they get better. But I think that you have to, take health in the context of a lot of things. How are you sleeping? What's your activity like? How's your, do you exercise? How's your stress mitigation? How's your stress exposure? How's your relationship with our day-night cycle, our circadian balance, so on and so forth. And so, but I think, relative to anything else, I mean, it's pretty darn good. It's difficult to overconsume meat. It's not impossible. I can do it. I mean, but I'm a guy that can eat, 3 or 4 kilos of meat a day, if I want to. I don't often do that because, then I gain too much weight. But I think in general, it is quite healthy. I don't feel that by only eating meat, you're going to be nutritionally deficient in general. I mean, this is interesting because, years ago when I first started talking about this, everybody's concerned about scurvy because we're always told you need these fresh fruits and vegetables to get vitamin C. If you don't get that, you'll get scurvy. Well, then no one got scurvy. I mean, there was some this singer, James Blunt, back in college, ate chicken and mayonnaise for a year, and he felt bad, and the doctor diagnosed him with scurvy. And it was, how did he diagnose this? I mean, this is just a kind of a nonsense scare thing. I have never legitimately seen a case of scurvy on carnivore in all the years I've been doing this. Now, I've had a few people that said, I had my teeth, I had some bleeding gums or something like that. But that, again, there's a lot of reasons for that. And it's not, scurvy is deadly. I mean, it literally kills people. It's pretty pronounced when it does occur. And I've never seen that. I've not even seen any real significant subclinical really concerns around vitamin C. This is the other concern. Well, you didn't get scurvy, but you're going to have this long-term vitamin. And this is, if you watch now, the major criticisms of carnivore are all these long-term subclinical things we can't test or can't verify because they can't prove that it's bad. It's just like, well, in 20 years, you're going to be at increased risk for heart disease, or you're going to have this subclinical vitamin C deficiency or fiber, long-term fiber, lack of fiber is going to lead to something negative in 10 or 20 years, which I can never prove. And therefore, that's my only criticism. Whereas it used to be, you're going to die immediately, you're going to get scurvy, all the things that were supposed to happen, which never did. And so now we have that, myself plus about 1 million people. I think there's probably 1 million people have done it now at this point, and probably growing on a daily basis. Probably in the next 3 years, we'll probably be at 10 or 20 million if things go that way. And I think we'll just continue to see what we're seeing, which is a lot of people getting healthy.
I think that the work that you do and all the people in the carnivore environment really focuses on the health benefits of carnivore. And if more people can see that as opposed to all the things that we're talking about, and I'm asking these questions because I can just understand that people watching this might be thinking, oh, red meat. Am I going to get enough? We're talking about a carnivore diet for adults and reversing metabolic disease. What about children? Because children eat things like processed foods and orange juice. So my first question for you would be, what is healthier for children, bacon and eggs or a wholemeal toast with jam?
No, the bacon eggs, I think for sure. I mean, I think that, whatever whole grain toast with jam is, sugar, fine grain. It's, gives you energy. Not much more than that. I mean, a lot of it's, a lot of, you think about a lot of the grain products, we have to fortify them with synthetic vitamins just to make them somewhat nutritionally complete. And the synthetic fortifications are inferior and some people would even say somewhat harmful in many ways. So, yeah, I mean, kids should be eating plenty of high quality protein based foods, animal foods. I think they should be eating lots of meat and eggs, and if they tolerate dairy products, and as a foundation of their food. Now, do kids need to be strict carnivores? No, clearly they don't. Some might. There might be some that do. Maybe a little kid with Crohn's disease or some other issue, they might have to do that for a while, maybe indefinitely. But the average kid, because kids' job's to grow, and I mean, so you have to provide them adequate nutrition to grow. And as you probably know, a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people do undereat on carnivore. We see that all the time. That's one of the biggest problems a lot of people run into, because one, they come at it with the designs of losing weight intentionally. So they intentionally restrict how much they eat, and maybe they do that too much. And then they end up cold, tired, having a lot of cravings. Maybe they see their metabolism slow down a little bit. Maybe their hair starts falling out. I mean, this is after a chronic period of time of undereating, because they're desperate to lose weight. And so kids, you got to make sure they stay on the growth curve. You got to make sure they're doing well. Now, I have seen people raise their kids carnivore, and they've done great. I mean, the kids are thriving. They're smart. They're well behaved. They're on the growth curve. They're athletes, and so it's not that you can't do that. I don't know that it's, like I said, I think the necessity of that, it's better than the average diet for sure. I mean, the average kid diet these days is terrible. Certainly in the U.S. I don't know about Australia, but I assume it's probably somewhat similar with all the processed food. Hopefully, we're going to fix that a little bit. But I don't think the government is going to impact it to the degree that we'd like it to happen. But maybe there's going to be a slight shift, and maybe there'll be some education to where parents just stop buying this stuff, which would be really good, because that's the real thing. We're talking this Make America Healthy Again, sort of. We've got that, this little bit of momentum around that. But I mean, the reality is the only way Americans get healthy is if they want to themselves, and they stop paying to poison themselves. You just have to give these companies money. If they're poisoning, you stop buying their stuff. Said that many, many times.
Do you think there's any hope with the Make America Healthy Again campaign? Is there any hope? Because you always think about like these campaigns and governments and stuff, and they are tied in with big companies and pharmaceutical companies. Is there any hope of changing the US in terms of the healthcare system?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's always hope. And, the way I see healthcare going for a large segment of the population, we have this allopathic system, which is largely controlled by the pharmaceutical industry. Doctors are educated via the pharmaceutical industry. They are funded. They're educated throughout their career that way. There's an enormous pressure. Most of the, drug treatment algorithms are developed by the pharmaceutical company and their proxies in these various, organizations, American Heart Association, American Diabetes Association, so on and so forth. And so what we'll see is, because healthcare is ridiculously expensive in this country, we spend, approaching $5 trillion a year on healthcare. We get very little in return for that when it comes to, good outcomes like life expectancy. And, most of that is spent on chronic disease. And one of the things that, I think will happen is you will see the continued elevation of things like AI integrated into healthcare, to the point where, believe it or not, right now there's legislation in the U.S. House of Representatives being put forth to give AI a medical license. That is to say, you could develop an AI that would have a medical license. So you would not have to see a doctor. You could literally go on your computer, get diagnosed, and treated with medications from a computer. Now, some people are horrified by that. Some people are like, that'd be great because I don't have to put on my clothes, drive to the doctor's office, wait 3 months for an appointment, and yada yada yada. And you whatever you interact with the computer somehow, type it in, talk it in. Maybe you have an interface that can take some blood, that can be analyzed on the spot. We're going to be at the point where we can sense, blood, through the skin. And you might get a diagnosis, within, 5 minutes or a differential diagnosis. This is most likely. And then you'll get a treatment algorithm. These are the drugs that are available to you. These are the risk factors. What would you like to do? And you say, I'd like this drug. And then an Amazon drone flies it to your house. You have that there within, 3 or 4 hours and you're good to go. Many people will love that system, particularly the drug companies, because then they don't have to sit there and, sort of have physician gatekeepers. They can just bypass that whole step. So now it truly is direct drug to consumer with very little oversight from physicians, much cheaper. Physicians represent about 10% of healthcare costs in the U.S. So we're not the biggest driver, but it is something that the pharmaceutical company would love to bypass if they could. So that's going to happen. There's, and I think the human element of medicine will be replaced by the robotic element. And some of it will be better. There'll be more efficiency. The computer knows more than I do or anybody. You've got the world of information at your fingertips. So there's some validation in that. But a lot of people, particularly when it comes to treating chronic disease, the pills are not the answer in many cases. And in many cases, it requires, re-education. It requires support. It requires a team dedicated to actually fixing you, not just medicating you. Instead of pills, we're talking about progress. And that's, like as we mentioned earlier, that's what I'm doing with Revero. It's our company that we basically interface with people every day. When a patient signs up for Revero, they don't get doctor visit, see you in 6 months for another 15-minute visit. It's literally come up with a plan. We work with you, we empower you, and then we check on you every single day. And there's data coming back and forth on a daily basis so that we can react to that, act on that, make modifications, take you off medications, change medications, change the plan if needed. And so that is in sharp contrast to the typical model, which is, you wait 3 months for an appointment, you see your doctor for 15 minutes, quick visit, scribble some prescriptions, I'll see you in 6 months. That is ineffective. That I think most people are dissatisfied with that. But that's, we've got so many sick people. And we've got an overwhelmed system. And, and the problem is obviously we're creating too many sick people because we've got this horrible food system. And it's very profitable. It's profitable for the food system. It's profitable for the medical system, but it comes at the price of everybody sick. And no one's really getting improvements or any significant improvements.
Well, I think that if people can take control of our own health and make those changes, we can definitely see improvements. That is a big thing that people say, that they can't find a doctor that can support them, especially on a carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet. So your company, which you are a founder or co-founder of, it's called Revero. So it's an online doctor support program available all around the US. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, Revero, it's Revero.com. And we are licensed in all 50 states. We have providers all over the country. All of our providers are supportive of carnivore diets. It's not the only thing we use. We'll use a ketogenic diet. We'll use a low-carb diet when appropriate, because not everybody, to be honest, needs to be on a strict carnivore diet. Some people do. And some people progress to that. Some people maintain it. Some people can get by with a little less restriction. But yeah, we are very much lifestyle nutrition first, and pills are, something we mostly de-prescribe. But if it's appropriate, some people will need to be on them for a longer period of time. But generally, our mission is to treat the root cause. Most of our patients stay with us for about 6 months because that's all they need. They don't need to be with us forever, and that's not our goal. Our goal is to fix people, not just to keep them medicated for the rest of their life. That is the standard pharma-based medical approach. Is just put you on a medication, you get refills for every month for the rest of your life, until you're 100 or whatever, 90 or 80 or however long you live. And of course, it's very profitable because it's like, well, I've got 20 million people that are addicted to this drug. I'm addicted in a way that they feel that they have to have it to live, whether it's their hypertensive medications or diabetes medicine or their autoimmune medication or they're anti-inflammatory, whatever it might be, depression meds. And so if they're, so that's a great model. It's a great business model. It's interesting. A few years ago, Goldman Sachs, which is a huge financial institution in the U.S., was asked to do a analysis of curing disease, and did it make financial sense to cure diseases? And they came out decisively and said, no, it makes no financial sense to cure diseases. And you've got all these companies whose fiduciary responsibilities to their shareholders to make money, and so they're like, well, there's no interest in curing disease. That's why all the drugs you're seeing marketed and developed right now are basically lifestyle medicines. They are designed to be taken for the rest of your life, like these new weight loss drugs, the GLP-1 receptor agonist drugs, the Ozempics, the Wegovy's, Zepbounds, Morzanos, and all those things. The plan is for you to take it for the rest of your life, forever. Just take it. And the narrative is you can never overcome obesity. It is a disease just like, anything else might be. And the only way you can deal with it is to take drugs for the rest of your life. You shouldn't be bullied or shamed about that. It's not your fault. I get the marketing angle, but the reality is it's not. I mean, you certainly, and you see it all the time. I see it all the time. People that lose hundreds of pounds and they maintain it. And I can't imagine how many people I've met that said, hey, I used to be 400 pounds. And you look at them, they're 150 pounds normal. And I said, well, how long ago? That was 6-7 years ago. And I'm still this way. And I'm eating carnivore. I'm eating close to carnivore. So, but yeah, so there'll be a huge emphasis on drugs for the rest of your life. We're raising our kids. Many kids are on drugs by the time they're teenagers, and they're just being trained. It's like, we've just been slowly propagandized and brainwashed into thinking that it's normal to be on drugs, and it's everybody is, and don't be worried about it. Or you should really, it's a red flag. If you need to be on a medication, there's a real problem here, and you need to figure out the source of the problem, not just medicate the symptoms. I think that's you should do everything you can to do that. I wouldn't accept. The biggest question I tell people is when they're with their doctor, you start asking more why questions. Why is this happening to me? Why did I get this? Why did I get Crohn's disease? Why do I have arthritis? And if you don't get a good answer, and if the answer is we don't know, it's genetics, bad luck, then you've got somebody that doesn't have very good insight, is not going to likely be able to help you, because you got to understand why these things are happening. If you don't know that, then how the hell are you going to fix it? He's going to throw Band-Aids on it, right? And that's what healthcare has become.
Now, as Dr. Baker mentions, the carnivore diet can help you heal so many different chronic diseases and potentially help you get off medications. And I want you to realize that what you eat has the power to change your health, and that involves eating more red meat and eating more healthy saturated fats. Now, as you make the switch towards eating more healthy saturated fats, more meat, and lowering the carbohydrates, you might experience some side effects like headache, nausea, and fatigue. Now, all this is very normal, especially at the beginning. So what you can do is to lean on some high quality salt your meals, and salt your water. But if the symptoms still persist, I would highly recommend that you consider using an electrolyte, one that has sodium, potassium, and magnesium, because this is so important for proper brain and body function. And that is why I have Element as a sponsor of today's video. Now, I personally like to use a high quality supplement like Element because it has a science-backed mix of sodium, potassium, and magnesium without anything artificial and no preservatives. Now, Element has a wide variety of flavors to choose from, but I like to use the raw unflavored option every morning in my morning coffee, just half a sachet, and the other half a sachet I use in my water during the day. And right now, Element is offering my viewers this free sample pack on every order. So you're going to get 8 single servings of Element to try for free. So if you want this, just head to drinkelement.com/the Primal Podcast. Question about success stories, because people see these success stories and they want the same thing. What is the biggest success story that you've seen in the almost 10 years that you've been doing carnivore?
Gosh, there are so many. I got to tell you, some things have blown me away. There's many. I could mention. It was interesting. I interviewed a woman, maybe 6 months ago, and she had a daughter, little kid, maybe a 5-year-old daughter, who had this extremely rare congenital gut disease that her child was born with. And basically, the natural history is most of those kids die very young. They die, as toddlers, and a few of them will make it a little bit older, but they'll often end up with a gut transplant. They'll literally have their entire gut transplant, which is very difficult because you have to have a gut that fits. So you got to wait for another basically child to die. But so it's very rare that it happens. And it's not, and it's a pretty rare disease. There's only a few hundred people in the world that have it at any one time. So she has this disease, and her kid is literally, dying. The baby she's like 2.5 years old and weighs like 20 pounds. Just emaciated, big, distended, bloated gut, skinny, scrawny arms, being fed, with what's called a peg, a little tube into her belly. And she's got TPN, which is tubes, feed through her IVs. And she's struggling. And the mom put the kid on carnivore. And the kid was able to come off the TPN, starting to eat. She starts regaining her weight. Her distension and bloating goes down immediately. And she starts waking up. She starts growing. Now she's 5, running around, playing. Doctors have never seen this before. She's like, I thought my daughter was going to die. Literally, I was preparing for her death. And now she's like a normal kid running around with this disease that basically no one survives, or very few people ever survive. And she's on the track to be a normal kid, which is unheard of with this particular condition. So that's, there, and obviously there's only the fact that there's only a few hundred of these people in the world. There's not going to be many people that particular disease affects, but it goes to show you, because this is literally a genetic birth disease that's not necessarily due to an ongoing environmental issue, but it's modified by that. Same thing with things like Ehlers-Danlos, which is a genetic connective tissue disorder where people end up dislocating their joints all the time, and they have this risk for, all kinds of other complications, POTS syndrome, which plays with their blood pressure. And I've seen multiple people. I remember the first time I saw someone talking to me about that. This was another physician who had this condition. It was a 57-year-old emergency room physician who said she started every day with 3 or 4 joints totally dislocated. So she'd have to start her morning because she'd sleep, toss and turn at night, and her joints would pop out of place. That's how loose her connective tissue was. So she'd have to put her joints back in, and then she would go to work, and she'd work in the emergency room. And about every other day at the emergency room, like her wrist would dislocate, her shoulder would dislocate, so she'd have to put that back in and go back to work. And that had been her life for, several decades, right? She just got a condition, and she was, had a lot of pain, because you can imagine your joints coming in and out of places, damaging to them. A lot of pain, a lot of arthritis, wasn't able to really exercise. She went carnivore. Within 1 month, her joint stopped dislocating. She was able to start exercising. She lost like 40 pounds and just thriving. And to this day, I don't know, I just cannot imagine how diet impacts this genetic connective tissue disorder. But not only that, I've seen dozens and dozens, maybe even hundreds of people with this condition now that have seen similar results. It's just remarkable. So, I'm at the point where I think good nutrition will impact every single health situation, whether acute or chronic, whether genetic or not, whether acquired or, birth. I think, I've seen somebody with cerebral palsy, again, birth injury, often with, babies that have, oxygen anoxic injuries when they're born. They have this neurological development. I've seen those people improve, maybe not cure. I've seen, autism improve significantly. So at the very least, you can say it can greatly improve the quality of life, whether it cures something or not. I think it does cure some of these conditions. I think Crohn's disease, it cures, or can cure. I should say, I should be more precise on that. It can cure it. And many others.
I think that people, when they hear that and they want the healing of chronic disease, people also come for weight loss. So if somebody has that in mind and they say, Dr. Baker, I want to do carnivore because I want to lose some weight, what would you say to somebody if that's their main goal?
There are a lot of ways to lose weight. You can lose weight on a whole bunch of diets, including carnivore. Not everybody loses weight on a carnivore diet, but many and most do. I think if that's your goal, then you have to really look at the root cause of why you're overweight in the first place. And it's probably you have some sort of maladaptive relationship with your nutrition, right? And that has to be your primary focus. And so when I tell people that, I said, look, you probably did not, become 50 kilos overweight or 100 pounds overweight because you were eating, bacon and eggs and steak every day. You were probably eating a lot of processed food or whatever, maybe some sweets, something, most likely. And so you have to, figure out how you can get away with not eating that stuff anymore or minimizing that. And really, it's a food addiction issue in many cases of some sort or some kind of eating disorder. That requires, support, I think, is very important. I think having, support. We know, like, a few years ago, I surveyed 12,000 people on the carnivore diet and asked them about their level of support. And the people that had a supportive physician or supportive family, friends, coworkers were about 30% more likely to be successful. Right. So it's a pretty big impact. So getting that supportive environment is important. I think that, but I think the fundamental thing is you have to fix your relationship with that stuff. And, it's almost like for many alcoholics, I mean, it's not practical to tell an alcoholic just to cut back a little bit, just have a couple glasses of beer on the weekends and you'll be fine. And that doesn't work out too well for most people. So I think a lot of people, the abstinence can be very helpful with this. I mean, I think I often tell people, because, a lot of people are like, I'm going to go carnivore, I'm going to lose all this weight. And they're determined to lose weight right away. And so they start by, like I said, maybe eating too little. And then they have these awful cravings. And then they say carnivore is not right for me because I can't deal with it. So I tell people in the beginning, you just need to eat enough. And how much do you need to eat? You need to eat enough so you don't need a cupcake. You don't want a cupcake. You've eaten enough steaks, so you're like, I don't want that cupcake. That's where you need to be initially for a period of time. Now, that doesn't mean that's what you want to do for the rest of your life. But initially, until you can change that relationship to where you can be hungry. You can literally be hungry and there's chocolate cake in front of you or whatever you love. And you're like, I'm good. I don't need that. Because prior to me doing this, a decade ago, I was a guy that said, hey man, I think I'll eat dessert first because you don't know, maybe you won't survive dinner. You better have that dessert first. I love dessert. I still like dessert. I don't eat it, but I mean, I loved it. And so I think it's about changing that relationship with food more than anything. Regardless of what the number on the scale says, whether it goes up or down initially, you've got to deal with this stuff, and figure out, and you got to have a plan. You can't just, cravings will happen and you've got to have a plan for those cravings, because I want to ask people, what's your plan for cravings? And they usually look, what do you mean? What's my plan? I said, well, if you don't have a plan, failure to plan is planning to fail. We've all heard that saying before. And so I talk to people about the physiology of cravings and how what plans you might have. I mean, I know that cravings are usually short-lived. They're usually 30, 45-minute sort of deals based on hormonal fluctuations. So if I can, distract myself for 45 minutes, go for a walk, engage in conversation, listen to music, watch a show, read a book, go exercise, whatever, go sit in a sauna. Then when I'm done, I'm like, okay, I'm good. Craving's gone. I beat it. And then it's like, just every day, you go to war. It's kind of like you go to war every day. Some days you win, some days you don't. You want to win more than you lose. And hopefully mostly you win. As you build in those habits, it gets easier and easier. But I mean, I think it's not realistic to tell people that there'll be no struggle ever and it's always easy. You hear about some people, they eat as much as they want and the weight just falls off of them. And then everybody's jealous about that because it didn't happen to them maybe. And some people are like, well, it didn't happen to me and I had to struggle. I will tell you, I'm almost 60 years old and I've been, fortunate to be generally pretty healthy, but I put in the time, put in the work, and some days I don't feel like it. I just do it anyway because I just know it's the right thing to do. And, I have to deal with occasional cravings and I usually, I'm pretty good about saying, okay, I got different strategies. And so, I mean, it's, life is a struggle. If it wasn't a struggle, it'd be pretty boring, because, if there's no pain, there's no joy, so you got to have these relatives ups and downs. If we were all blissfully happy at all times, we would all get bored. We would all be like, oh, this is boring. And we'd we'd look for trouble, so I think you just have to realize that, it's there. You have to put some effort into it, but the rewards, the upside, I think, are far, far, far more exciting, particularly as we get older. Because, I used to, when I used to do like knee replacements and hip replacements and stuff like that, I would see a lot of these people that were, 60 years old, getting ready to retire, or they might have just retired. And their entire existence was going from one doctor appointment to another doctor appointment to a test and it was on. And their little existence, like a third of their lifespan, was dedicated to going to the doctor's office. I'm like, that's not what you want. The last thing you want to do when you're not working is to hang out in the doctor's office. You want to be out there, enjoying the world, enjoying life. So just a little bit of effort. And, I exercise nearly every day, and I exercise quite intently, and I with quite a bit of intensity, but it's not that long. I mean, I just got done working out. I worked out for like 45 minutes, done. You know, that's not that much time.
So I think that with people, when they come to carnivore, it's for different reasons. Some is to heal chronic disease. Some of it is to lose weight. So for some people, it's the both of the things. But we're going to talk about how to get faster carnivore results because people see the results, they want to get them faster and playing a food game. But I do want to ask you because people might hear about the gut and the gut microbiome. Do you need a diverse gut microbiome to be healthy?
I think healthy people have healthy microbiomes. I think that's the way we should look at things, and what that means is, depending on the eye of the examiner. I mean, I think we look at it backwards. We have this perception of what a healthy diet is, Mediterranean diet, low fat, lots of fiber, a little bit of seafood, lots of cruciferous vegetables, whatever, whole grains. And we look at the people's microbiome that are consuming that diet and we say, aha, that's the healthiest diet. Therefore, that's the healthiest microbiome. And it has a certain percentage of, bifido and lactobacillus and all, whatever's in there. I mean, there's gazillions of bacteria in there. I mean, but diversity is something that, believe it or not, a carnivore diet actually lends itself to significant diversity, at least in the amount that it's been studied. There was a recent study done out of Europe in Croatia, believe it or not, where they looked at, I think they did detailed microbiome analysis on about 35 people. And one of them was a 6-year carnivore. And the 6-year carnivore's diversity was in the top percentile of all the people. It was one of the more diverse microbiomes. And I've seen that over and over again, but I don't put as much stock in that. I just think that we should look at health in terms that are objectively clinically useful to us. How do I feel? How do I perform? How does my gut function? If I've got a diverse microbiome and it looks good on paper, but I'm bloated and in pain all the time, is that really a healthy gut? I would argue it's not. So I think we have to go back to first principles about what it means to be healthy. But having said that, I think that it's 2025. We've been talking about cholesterol since about 1908 or something like that. Since when they started sticking it in, feeding rabbits fat. This is a discussion on cholesterol. We are still debating that one singular molecule 120 years later. One molecule. The gut microbiome is composed of billions and billions and even trillions of individual microbes of different species that change every 15 minutes at times. The complexity is many orders of magnitude more complex than the interaction of cholesterol. So to presume that we can make proclamations and be prescriptive about gut microbiome is extremely, extremely, in my view, sort of almost, arrogant to think that we can just say, hey, this is the right microbiome for you. I mean, sure, you can identify pathologies. You can say, hey, if you've got like a C. difficile infection, you've got this overgrowth of this really pathologic bacteria, yes, that's a problem. But to say that the only way you can be healthy is to have this specific microbiome pattern, I think is premature. And I think we're going to find that. So I will just go back to my point. A healthy person, as defined by what I think most people would accept as healthy, will have a healthy microbiome.
It's interesting that you have that perspective because when I speak to many doctors that aren't particularly carnivore, they're going to say that you have to have fiber for a healthy gut. And the main opposition for a carnivore diet is that it's very dangerous if you don't have the fiber. But then I was listening to Dr. Ben Bickman, and he was saying that an opposing view around that is that perhaps the fiber is just feeding on bacteria, proliferating that bacteria. You just get gas and you feel bloated and you have more bowel movements. And that's that mechanism of action and why they think it's going to create a diverse microbiome. But as you said, we don't know exactly what creates a diverse microbiome because you have carnivores having a diverse microbiome and they only eat a handful of foods, animal foods.
Yeah, it was interesting, in that particular study I showed you, they had an abundance of bacteria that were supposed to be fiber-loving bacteria as well, even though they were carnivore. So again, I think these assumptions we're making are a little bit premature. There was a nice paper that a guy named Tommy Wood, Lucy Mailing, and another fellow from UCLA wrote about 2 years ago called, I think it was titled something like The Metabolic Flexibility of the Gut. And they basically said, while we understand that fiber has these potential beneficial effects, particularly when it comes to things like short chain fatty acids, a high fat animal based diet can achieve similar results through, mechanisms which, are similar, and it can be equivalently as beneficial to the gut. So there's data out there that supports this. And I, as someone who sees a lot of people with gut issues, particularly, IBS, IBD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, things of that nature, I consistently see that improve tremendously on carnivore, which again, when it comes to gut health, I mean, your gut should feel good at the very least. And I think that's a better indicator than rather what bacteria, because the bacteria in your gut are literally impacted by everything, the weather, whether you've had a cold, how much exercise you do, how much sleep you get, what's in your household environment, all these things are going to impact it. And, to say that, fiber is the answer is, I mean, I would concede that fiber is relatively beneficial and it's contextually based. If you're eating a standard junk food diet, then yeah, fiber is going to be beneficial because it's going to displace some of the garbage, might mitigate some of the glucose excursions. But to say that it's absolutely critical, not necessary, and people that don't consume it, like myself, are going to be at increased risk for whatever is at best unknown.
Well, I think it's important to dispel that myth because people might be on a carnivore diet and then hear these fiber myths and all these different things that we hear. But it's important to understand diverse microbiomes don't come necessarily from fiber. It's your environment, it's your food, it's different factors. Let's talk about how to get faster carnivore results. That's always fun. Part of this is going to be a game, but first question for you is pertaining to high fat carnivore. I love high fat carnivore. It has helped me heal so many different things. Do you think everyone has to do high fat carnivore?
No, I don't. And I do see a different, certainly there are some people that I would say are more likely to be have greater benefits on high fat carnivore. I think those would be people with any kind of central nervous system issue. So these would be things like multiple sclerosis, any kind of the mental health issues, depression, anxiety, bipolar, those types of things. I think females tend to do slightly better on higher fat than men as a general rule, but there are obviously a lot of exceptions to that. I mean, females just generally on a per kilogram basis tend to require more energy than a man does. At rest. Now activity levels and all those things can obviously change that.
So for you personally, do you do a high fat carnivore approach? And can you define what is high fat?
Well, I mean, classically, anything over 30% of your calories would be considered high fat. The average American diet is around 30% fat by calorie. And so the leanest carnivores are going to be more fat than that. Like when I'm eating a very low, what I would consider a lower fat carnivore diet, I'm probably still consuming in excess of 50% of my calories from fat. So on average, I probably consume 60 to 70% of my calories come from fat, and that's like a ribeye steak. That's pretty, or entrecote, or you guys call it Scotch filet. I think that is, I think a pretty good maintenance place. I think if you're going to be on a ketogenic style of carnivore diet, you're going to probably need more fat beyond that. And I think for me personally, when it comes to a weight loss thing, I'll eat a little bit leaner than that, but I won't eat low fat. I don't eat like what we would consider like a low fat diet would be like a diet where 15-20% of your calories come from fat. That's untenable for me. I would just be completely miserable with that style of diet approach. And I don't think anybody on a carnivore diet is on a truly low fat diet. There are people that are on more of a moderated fat diet and not a high fat diet. But yeah, so I think the normal range for most people at maintenance is probably somewhere between 60 and 80% of their calories coming from fat. So that looks like about a 1-to-1 or a 1-to-2 protein to fat ratio for the average person.
I think many people are going to say, what the heck does that mean? Let's talk about protein to fat ratios, how much protein that people need to eat. And then we spoke about the fat. Okay, first question. What does protein to fat ratio mean? And does somebody have to track that when they first start?
No, you don't have to. I mean, and particularly early on, depending on where you're coming from. And the nice thing about carnivores is like, hey, eat steak, eat meat, till you're full, repeat. And a lot of people end up losing weight. Now, some people, when they stall out or if they have other issues, might find some benefit in tracking some things. So protein as a macronutrient has what's considered roughly 4 calories. It's not exactly 4, but it's close enough. And then fat is considered to have 9 calories. So if you were to eat 1 gram of protein, and 1 gram of fat, you would have 13 calories, 9 of which would come from the fat and 1 would come from the protein. If you do the math on that, that's like 63% or something like that. And then if you eat 2 grams of fat and 1 gram of protein, now if you do the math, you're at about 81% of your calories coming from fat. So foods that are 1-to-1, an egg is a pretty good 1-to-1. It's usually about 6 grams of fat and 6 grams of protein. A ribeye is, depending on how lean it is, if it's a prime, USDA prime, super well marbled, then you're probably looking at 1 of protein and 1.2 of fat, somewhere in that neighborhood. Like a T-bone steak might get you closer to 1-to-1 or slightly under 1-to-1. So there's different, and it's not hard to find. You just look it up, how much protein, how much fat's in there, and you can do the calculations yourself.
I think most people, they get a bit confused around, protein to fat ratios and how much protein, how much fat. However, if they eat these foods, which we're going to play a game right now, which is how to get faster carnivore results with certain foods. If they eat these foods, maybe they can get better results. So I have about 10 foods here, I think. So for you, Dr. Baker, if you could tell me, is this food going to get someone better results when it comes to healing? Maybe the weight loss, but let's talk about healing. You can rate them out of 10. There's some carnivore and some people think that are okay on a carnivore diet. How does that sound? Is that okay?
Okay, so 10 is the highest score.
10 is like brilliant for healing on carnivore. I think the first one's going to be a 10, just saying.
Okay, let's see what we got. Yeah.
Ribeye.
Yeah, ribeye I would give a 10 for sure.
Okay, why is it a 10?
Well, because it is, I think red meat is the least likely to be irritative to most people. It is pretty well balanced in a fat to protein ratio. I think that fat becomes incredibly important on a carnivore diet. I think that without the carbohydrates in there, you need adequate fat. Now, again, the caveats are being if someone has really got a lot of excess body fat, then that may not be where they need to go. But I'm just saying a general person that maybe is a relatively normal weight that might have, say, an autoimmune disease, I think this would be a pretty good place to start.
Okay, 10 out of 10. What are some budget options if people can't afford ribeye?
Ground beef, mince, steak haché if you're in France. Those things are I think they're great. I think ground beef. The only caveat I would say about ground beef is depending on how you cook it, there is a difference in the way we process rendered fat and whole unprocessed fat. So when we cook fat and we turn it into grease, it's going to be handled a little bit differently in the gut. And for some people, that grease, because it's so concentrated, can kind of overwhelm our absorption capacity, and we end up with diarrhea, loose stools, and things like that. So if I'm cooking burgers, I will usually cook them and maybe just leave them kind of a little pink on the inside so that the fat isn't all completely cooked out of it, and consume it that way. So I can still get that whole fat, in there. But ground beef is a great option. I would eat it more often, but I have a lot of steaks in my freezer. I will admit I get a lot of ranchers just send me steaks because they know that I'll talk about it and they get some free advertising. And so I've got a lot of steaks, so I'm definitely going to eat them.
You're lucky thing. I see all these good steaks that you're eating.
Yeah. No, I'm very, very fortunate that I'm in a position where people like to send me steaks, and I'm sure as heck going to eat them. So
Okay, the next one might be a bit interesting. Keen to hear your thoughts. Out of 10, how good is it for healing?
bacon, I would probably put bacon 6 to 7, something like that. I would say. I mean, the reason I'd say that is because there are people where pork is an irritant. I mean, there are people that just don't tolerate pork as well as a general class. Now, there's plenty of people that tolerate it well. I think the other thing is that, bacon in general, sometimes it can be combined with some stuff that's problematic for people. Some of the preservatives, depending, there's bacon, but let's say we have, salt cured bacon that's doesn't have a bunch of other ingredients in there. So it might bump that up a little bit. And again, it kind of depends on how you cook it, because, if you cook it like super crispy, then it becomes not very high in fat. If you cook it where it's still got a lot of the fat in there, then it's going to be higher fat content. So it's less predictable, I would say. So I think it's some people don't tolerate pork, and then the way the way it's prepared, and then how you cook it's going to make an impact. Whereas a ribeye steak generally is pretty consistent.
Okay, I think people are going to be a bit surprised by that, but it's true. Bacon is great, but not as good as a ribeye. So if we can prioritize ribeye, ground beef, ruminant meat, better than and having the bacon as a side. Next one is good. I love this.
Butter. Yeah, butter, I would say, is probably also, I would give it somewhere in that 6 to 7 range. You know what? I'm just thinking, I'm thinking the lowest is going to be a carnivore. Like if we were putting all foods that exist on Earth, and these numbers would be skewed differently. I'm just thinking about within the category of carnivore, 10 being the ribeye and 1 being, I don't know, something, maybe, I don't know, maybe milk or something like that. So yeah, bacon, I mean, obviously it's good. It still can be good. It's the problem with butter and really any, uh, concentrated processed fat is that it can be very easy to overconsume for some people. And also, as a rendered fat, it can cause digestive problems for some people. Also, there are people that just dairy is just not a good idea for them. So I think there's some caveats to that. So, but I mean, if I were to compare it to say, uh, canola oil or sunflower oil as a cooking oil, I'd say clearly it's a better thing. It is full of vitamin, it's got fat soluble vitamins in there. It's not bacon. Butter is not pure fat. I think it's about by volume, it's about 80% fat. There's some water in there. There are some minerals in butter as well. Whereas tallow is a pure fat. It's like 100% fat. So there's a little bit slight differences between tallow and butter.
So would you like tallow better than butter?
I think from a health standpoint, slightly better. It's still a rendered fat, so the same caveats apply. From a taste standpoint, depending on how you're preparing, I think, butter might taste a little better depending on, how it's being utilized. So it's kind of there.
100% salted butter, grass-fed salted butter. That's my weakness.
Yeah, no, it tastes really good. Yeah, I did a video a few weeks ago tasting some really different butters that I thought I'd do that for fun. And, there was one that was a French salted butter that had little salt crystals in there. Really good, really nice. So butter tastes really good. I think it would win on the taste test. Tallow is pretty neutral. It doesn't really have much of a flavor to it.
Okay, this one you did a video on before. It's not carnivore, but people want to try to add it in.
I did. Okay, avocado. So I would say that one I would give. I wouldn't call it a carnivore food, so I would probably put it somewhere in the maybe 3 to 4 range, again, relative. And again, I don't want to just put this in the spectrum of, avocado is a fruit. It's higher in fiber. It does contain some compounds that some people might find irritative. I mean, fiber itself might irritate some people. Some people might find that it leads to other cravings. Some people might find that things like the salicylate content in avocados, I believe, might be problematic for them. So while it's certainly, in the context, it's a ketogenic staple. A lot of people on ketogenic diets like avocado because it's high in fat. And, so I mean, it's again, if I were talking about, if they were going in the full spectrum, I would have negative numbers, like a donut would be like a -20 or something like that. So just put that in mind on the scale.
I understand. I thought it's just a fun game so that people can understand how to get better results. As we can see, the ruminant meats are best, and then the bacon and the butter is maybe a size, a 6 or a 7. But obviously, the donuts and the pastries and stuff, they're a -100. Let's not have those. But people have questions. They also consume a lot of this, which is probably really good.
Yeah, eggs. I would put eggs, probably an 8. Again, with the caveat being that there are a few people that do have sensitivities to eggs. And, but yeah, eggs are versatile. I think they taste pretty good. I have eggs from time to time, and sometimes I consume a lot of them. I mean, I generally don't eat eggs unless I'm having half a dozen, something like that. It's not worth the effort for me to get the pan out for 1 or 2 eggs. It's like, I'm going to have quite a few of them. So I eat them. I've eaten them raw. I've eaten them, I cooked. I've had, different, concentrations of egg whites and egg yolks. And in general, people tolerate the yolks better than the whites if there's a problem. I've seen that, there's some there's some concern, particularly consuming like straight up raw egg whites, particularly that can lead to problems with a compound called avidin, which interferes with biotin absorption, so there's potential problems there. And there are a number of people egg allergies are pretty common in the world. I mean, they're one of the more common allergens. So assuming that's not the case for you, then I would consider it a very high ranked food.
Interesting when people have thyroid issues or autoimmune issues, a protocol which is a part of the AIP diet, but also pertaining to carnivore, is to take out the eggs because, as you said, it's a common allergen. This is quite interesting. The Saladino carnivore diet, which is including
Honey, yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, I would put that below avocado. I think I would put that down about a 2 if I were to say that. I mean, I don't think it's magical. I mean, I get this. It's got some enzymes and different nutrients in there, and it comes from bees, so therefore it's an animal product. I don't consider it carnivore at all, in my view. I think it is. Obviously, it's got quite a bit of sugar in it. I mean, it's got fructose and sucrose and glucose. And, I don't think the fact that it comes from bees or it has some of these other things absolves it of the issues people have with sugar. Now, some people tolerate it fine. I mean, there's some people, obviously there's a lot of people that eat carbs that aren't sick. And so I think you just have to put in perspective where you're at. I think it could be very easy to turn it into a habit. I think it could be very easy to start over consuming it. I think it could be very easy for it to lead you down a path which you might regret. So I think if you are very disciplined in your utilization, it could be incorporated in a diet. Again, I don't know that everybody needs to be carnivore, but I'm just trying to think, how do we have a healthy diet? And I think you just have to realize that certain people, it's better to leave alone. If you're diabetic, insulin resistant, struggling with glucose metabolism, you have food addictions, you have particular susceptibilities to this may not be the best idea for you.
I would agree. It's when people hear about honey and the introduction of, animal carbohydrates, it's a slippery slope for some people, and you have to identify, are you one of them? I'm not one of them, suffering with food addiction for 20 years, and carnivore diet actually fixed that for me. Last food is kind of, people say yes and no to this. So keen to hear your thoughts.
Liver. I would probably give that probably 5, 6 or something like that. I know a lot of people, they'll point out the fact that it is rich in certain nutrients and so on and so forth. Liver is obviously high in iron. It's got, some level of vitamin C in it. It's quite high in vitamin A. It's got quite a bit of copper in it. I think that, there is this sort of belief, and I think some of the other folks that have kind of they're no longer carnivore. Interestingly, they made these proclamations that it was a superfood and you had to have it in your diet, and if you didn't, your carnivore diet would fail because you need these extra nutrients. I don't think that's really true. I don't think anybody long term. In fact, when I learned about this zero carb diet before it was called carnivore, the people that were advocating that they didn't feel it was necessary, and based on just human experience, the collective experience of thousands of people doing this for many, many years and even decades, were saying this is not necessary. And so and for many people, it just doesn't taste good. There's a lot of people that just literally are repulsed by the taste of liver. I happen to be one of them. I don't really like it. I don't enjoy it. I don't crave it. Now, it might be that there are some people that initially they are so depleted of, maybe they come from a plant-based diet or some other, really bad standard American diet where they're just malnourished. And then this higher vitamin availability might appeal to them initially. And so maybe early on it might be beneficial. But the people that are advocating that you consume, a pound of liver a week or, 100 grams a day or something like that, I don't think there's any real evidence to support that. I mean, this is one of those things that, making these sort of the nose to tail concept that, our hunter gatherers would have done that. That's, they sometimes base this on some of these modern indigenous tribes who are literally starving. I mean, they are subsisting in the worst places on earth because they've been ran out of all the good prime spots. They're hunting, typical food that they might have eaten hundreds and hundreds of years ago has been long gone. And so now you have, these Hadza warriors running around Tanzania eating baboons. I mean, that's not what they normally would eat. So now, of course, they're eating every part of that animal because they don't have any food. There's a difference between subsistence and surplus eating. And I would argue that for much of early human existence, we probably ate in a surplus. That is probably why we were able to develop this huge brain that we had. That's why we went from this tiny 300 cc brain that an early hominid had to a 1,1500 cc brain that we have now, because we had abundance of energy available to us in the form of animal fat. And so, because we had, basically, it's interesting. You read some of the early literature. There's a guy named Bas Edmeades who wrote this great book called Megafauna. And he talks about that believe it or not, one of the most prominent foods that we ate as early hominids was the giant tortoise. Because you think about the giant tortoise, they're very fatty and they're easy to kill if you're a human. They have no natural predators. They don't run away. They can't run away. They just suck into their shell. So what does human do? They come up with a big rock and break the shell. Animal dies. We've got a bountiful feast. And so that persisted for, arguably hundreds of thousands of years as we were developing as a species. And then we got more and more successful at hunting, and we started going to the bigger megafaunal animals that were full of fat. And, because one of the things they'll talk about is, well, when a wolf takes down an animal, he'll eat its insides. He'll eat the liver and he'll eat the stomach. But really what they're going for, I think, is the fat, because that's where, if you're hunting lean animals, zebras, like a lion taking down a zebra is pretty lean. The only fat they have in their body is internal. It's in their internal organs, in their viscera. So they go for that because they know that's where the fat is. And then because they can't access the bone marrow very well, they can't access the brain cavity because it's too well guarded. They just don't have the ability to do that. They therefore, settle for that fat around the viscera. And it's not because they're necessarily seeking out the organs. I think they're seeking out the fat. So yeah, I think liver is one of those things where if you like it, you really like it, go for it. I mean, I know there's people out there that are really concerned about vitamin A. And I say, if you eat a bunch of liver and you eat a bunch of eggs, you're going to get this vitamin A toxicity. And I'm not sold completely on that idea. I think that, I just think that, if I had a bunch of ribeye steaks and liver in front of me, I'm going to choose ribeye steaks 99 times, 100 times out of 100. Honestly, I would never pick the liver. And I don't think living 1,000 years ago or 50,000 years ago would have changed that for me. I mean, but we don't know for sure.
Well, it's good that you said that, because I think, as you said, most people don't love liver, but if they can focus on the other foods that you mentioned, the ribeye, and then, as an aside, bacon, the eggs are also awesome, but it seems like the ruminant meats are really good to get the better carnivore results. I do want to ask about mistakes, and I was thinking about this and I thought, well, you've been doing this for close to a decade. Have you made any mistakes in your journey that you could think of?
Oh gosh, I'm sure I have. I have done. I did a little experimenting early on, playing with different things, just to see what would work and what wouldn't work for me. And there was a period of time where I was playing with trying to maximize getting my blood glucose as low as possible. And I did that by eating a very, very, very high fat diet with probably clearly was lower protein and even lowish protein, particularly relative to what I normally do. And that resulted in me losing quite a bit of muscle mass and just then I got lean initially, but then I just kept going and I just got distracted and I got all the way down to like 205 pounds, the skinniest I've ever been. Everybody, like my family thought I had cancer. It was just like, that was in retrospect, I just pushed it too far. But I learned some stuff about that. I learned the stuff about, because I was really interested in some of the early data on diabetes, because back in the day, and because I deal with a lot of diabetics. And so I like to experience what I'm telling people, because I like to say, at least I've tried it, so I understand a little bit more about what people might be going through. And so I think that, there's just things that you can push a little bit too far from time to time. I don't know that, I wrote my book, it came out in 2019. I don't know that I would change much at all about it. I think it still holds up really well today. I don't know that, there's more studies that have come out now since that time that I could have included, but the basic tenets, the advice, the because human physiology and biology has not changed in 5 years. I mean, we're still the same thing. We were even thousands of years ago. We're still the same creature. And I think the same rules apply. So I don't think it's ever really going to be outdated much. So yeah, I mean, there's, I think that I've gotten to where, I overdid like electrolytes a few times where I got to where literally I was swollen, it's just like, so I mean, there's a few things, but nothing major, I would think that I would think. I do think that it is a mistake to tell people to completely ignore cholesterol. I think that is a mistake that some people in the low carb community make. I do think it's nuanced. I think, if you have high cholesterol, you should not just ignore it. It might not be a problem for you, but I mean, there's steps you should take. You probably, depending if you're over 40, start looking at some imaging to see how you fall in the risk stratification pathways and see where it goes. And we're still learning. We're still getting more data on this. So I don't think it's been proven conclusively that lean, healthy people, on low carb diets that have high cholesterol are immune from cardiovascular disease. I think that's clearly not true. But there's more nuance here than some people would believe.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because there's some things that people say, oh, this failed me on a carnivore lifestyle. One is, as you mentioned, chasing the blood glucose and those numbers. I want to go through a quick fire question around things that fail you on a carnivore diet and then your perspective on it, because it's not failing. It's just changes that happen. So let's address blood glucose numbers. Do you have to chase a certain number, and what is the range that's good?
Well, I think that the considered normal range of human blood glucose ranges between 70 and 140 milligrams per deciliter, right? And typically people say fasting blood glucose but below 100. There's some people that say 83 is the optimal number. I don't know if that's true or not. I think that we also have to realize that a fasting blood glucose on carnivore might require a longer fast than another diet because meat sits in your stomach for a long time. I mean, it literally takes a long time to get through your digestive tract. I mean, that's by design. It's like the same reason these GLP-1 drugs are having an effect. It slows down your gut because meat has an endogenous GLP effect, and it causes the gut to slow down for the purpose of it allows us to fully absorb that meat. And so you might still be absorbing nutrition 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 hours after a large meal. And so if you take a blood glucose 12 hours after you ate a big steak, you're not even fasting yet. You're still in this postprandial absorptive state, or absorptive state rather. And so the blood glucose might not necessarily be as low as you might want it to be. So that's something to think about. So I think, obviously now that we have CGMs and some of these things, we can get a better idea, a better feel for what our blood glucose might be doing. Our hemoglobin A1C might not match necessarily with our blood glucose due to, the difference in red cell viability. Sometimes the red cells live longer than we expect them to because they're healthier. And that artificially elevates our hemoglobin A1C. I've seen that happen before. So I think that, clearly if your blood glucose is routinely above 150, 160, 170, 180, milligrams per deciliter, then that's problematic. And that indicates some level of insulin resistance, prediabetes, diabetes, or something along that line. But I think that normal range is not necessarily a problem. And some people are concerned that, I woke up this morning, my blood glucose is 102. And it used to be, when I was on a strict keto diet, it was 85. And I don't know that's necessarily a bad thing given, and again, there's some caveats there. If you are losing weight, getting leaner, getting more muscle on you, and your blood glucose goes up 5 points, I think that's probably even a reasonable trade-off.
Okay, LDL cholesterol, you mentioned cholesterol, but LDL, that kind of increases. Is that a worry or a concern? For some people, it increases.
It can be. Yeah. I mean, it depending on how much it increases. I think that, we do think we have some reasons why it might increase, particularly for lean individuals, that are on low carb diet. We think that's consistent with something called a lipid energy model, which is just saying that your liver has to traffic more fat because there's not as much glucose available. And so that's how we feed our cells. And our cells they'll take our own body fat, they'll metabolize it, it'll be reprocessed in the liver and packaged into these so-called lipoproteins, of which LDL is one of them. And that is why we see that. Now the question becomes, is it problematic? And the answer to that is it depends, and we don't know for sure, but we do know that people that have imaging studies that have very low or very little plaque are less likely to be progressing with heart disease than those people that have high amounts of plaque. So if you've already got heart disease and you have LDL cholesterol, that potentially is a source of problems, and you might have to figure out strategies to deal with that.
What about kidney function? Increases in serum creatinine, which is a marker of kidney function on a carnivore diet. Is that a concern?
For the majority of people, it's not. Creatinine is a marker, really is a marker of protein turnover, is really what it is. That's what it's, really reflective. So someone who has a lot of muscle mass, like myself, someone who eats a lot of protein, someone who breaks down a lot of muscle, like someone who exercises a lot, those things are always going to result in a higher creatinine. And if that's the reason for that, then that's probably not a concern. Now, if you are small, don't have a lot of muscle mass, don't eat much protein, you're pretty sedentary, and you've got high creatinine, then that's probably a situation where that could be a problem and there could be an issue with your kidneys. Now, how do you distinguish between those two? If it's just a protein turnover issue, or if it's truly a kidney processing issue or filtration issue. There is a test called cystatin C, which will distinguish that. It's not dependent upon muscle mass or protein intake, and it gives you a truer estimate of the glomerular filtration rate, the GFR that we use to assess kidney function. Now, beyond that, you can directly measure that with things like inulin, and there's some other compounds that people use. But in general, when someone tells me their serum creatinine is going up and therefore carnivore is not working for me, I would tell them you probably need to assess it better, because that may simply just mean you're just eating more protein, and it's not a pathology.
Mm-hmm. Next one is, I'm not in ketosis and I'm not measuring, I'm doing my blood work and then I'm drawing the blood, not getting those high ketone numbers. Do you have to have high ketone numbers to get good carnivore results?
No, absolutely not. You can certainly lose weight without being in ketosis. You can actually gain weight while being in ketosis. It's not necessarily, the magic metric, and sometimes it's distracting. And you have to realize that the amount of ketones that you have in your blood, your urine, your breath, depending on how you measure it, are basically waste products, right? And so, when we get fat adapted, we want to utilize those ketones. So those ketones are something that we are actually using to fuel our cells, and particularly fueling our brain. And as we get more efficient at utilizing these ketones, they just don't hang around as much in the blood. So there's an amount that we produce, and there's an amount that we utilize, and whatever we don't use gets wasted. And so those show higher levels. But if we're using a lot of it and we're very efficient at using it, that's why a lot of people, as they do a ketogenic diet for a long period of time, the ketones often drop. And so you have to do sort of unusual things to really bump them up, like fast for a long time, or restrict your food, or exercise extra hard, or really increase the fat content. Those are the things that can drive up the ketones. But, it's not a prerequisite to get healthy on a carnivore diet. Carnivore diet often is ketogenic, but it's not always ketogenic. And I don't think it's required for many people. I rarely produce really high ketones given my typical pattern of eating and exercise and those types of things. Now, I certainly can. Like if I fast for a little bit longer, maybe increase the fat a little, I'll elicit more ketones. But does it make me any more healthy or make me lose or getting leaner? Not necessarily.
Okay. Last question for you. Is carnivore enough? Do you need things like electrolytes, salt, and iodine?
Well, is carnivore enough? And it depends what you mean by enough for what. Now, like I said, is it enough to cure every chronic disease? I would say I think it is. I think nutrition is a fundamental aspect of that problem. But I do think it's an holistic approach. I think you need to be sleeping well. I think you need to be not sedentary. I think you need to get out in the sunshine and interact with the light appropriately. I think you need to be mitigating stress. And so I think it's a critical component of healing and health. The question about electrolytes, yes or no. This little container here had electrolytes in there. I drank it because I was working out. I think, in the transition phase, a lot of people find that electrolytes help them because there is a somewhat of a diuresis, as you will, like you just kind of, you kind of urinate off all your sodium in your water, a lot of it. And so that helps you to transition so you don't get the headaches and the cramps and some of the heart palpitations that sometimes occur with dehydration. And then I think if you are someone who, like me, who sweats a lot, I get out there and work out, I'm sweating and breathing hard and so blowing off all that respiratory vapor. I think the electrolytes are helpful because you lose them. So you want to replace them. As far as iodine is concerned or not, I mean, if someone has like a thyroid issue, there is some evidence that supplemental iodine can be beneficial. However, I should tell people that too much supplemental iodine can actually be deleterious to the thyroid. So it's kind of one of those things where maybe a little bit might be helpful, but too much can actually have a negative effect on there. So, but I don't think routinely people need iodine. I don't think it's something that, everybody needs to be taking drops of iodine every day to be healthy on carnivore. I'm kind of, I guess, one of these old-fashioned people that thinks that humans don't need supplements to be healthy and survive, primarily because they didn't really exist, 100 years ago. There was a few guys, snake oil guys selling some stuff. But I mean, for the most part, the population wasn't consuming supplements. And I would argue many of them did just fine without that. And I know there's these arguments that modern farming and agriculture has depleted our soils and on and on and on. But again, it's not really carnivore kind of sort of, if you're eating an inferior diet, then the supplementation makes a little bit more sense. Kind of like the argument around the fiber. If you're eating an inferior diet, then fiber makes sense. But if you're eating a diet that is rich in highly bioavailable protein and essential fats and vitamins and minerals, then I think the supplementation becomes less of an issue for most people.
What would be your number one tip for people to get faster carnivore results if they're just starting?
I mean, it depends on what the results are. I think that consistency is key. So I think you do have to find a way to figure out consistency. I think you need to be objective. I think you should probably consider objectifying your results, because if you don't know what you're trying to treat, then it's hard. If you don't have a way to assess that, it's hard to assess progress and hard to assess if the adjustments you may or may not be making are effective. So if your goal is weight loss, obviously, and I should couch that in it should be fat loss. So it's body composition. So maybe taking a tape around your waist is better than stepping on the scale, perhaps. Those are the things that, I think, you can have some way of knowing the direction you're heading in and make adjustments as you will. I mean, like I said at the beginning, eat enough so you don't want junk. Put that food addiction in the closet so it doesn't come back out. Bury it somewhere, and go from there. And I think it's just sometimes it's consistency. And my friend Stan Everding likes to say compliance is the science. And figure out ways you can actually do it, because if you're flitting back and forth and you're watching everything and you're sticking blue stuff on your tongue and standing in front of red lights and ice bath, just stick with the plan for a while and get an idea what it's doing to you. And then you can start making subtle adjustments. I mean, I just think the big basic things are the things that are most important. And this is nutrition, sleep, activity, exercise, stress mitigation, sunlight. I mean, if you do those things, focus on those, as you get wins, then you'll be able to continue to improve in all those areas. And I think that's really it. There's no secrets, I don't think.
Well, I hope people get some wins. I hope they get some consistency or start the carnivore diet and give it a go for at least 90 days. And that's what you advocate as well. It doesn't have to be lifelong. Dr. Baker, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to leave all the links in the description of this episode for Revero, your podcast, your Twitter, your Instagram, you're everywhere. Is there anywhere else that they can find you or anything new that you'd like to share?
Oh gosh, no, there sure. No, I mean, I think the Revero.com stuff. I mean, if you're in the U.S., I hope maybe one day we'll be able to go overseas. But if you're in the U.S. and you have a health problem, that you'd like a doctor that doesn't want to just medicate you and actually interested in curing and treating the root cause and having daily support, which I think is critical, check out Revero.com. I'm there. I literally meet with all the patients once a week. So if you want to talk to me, directly, then I make myself available to all of our patients. Obviously my social media I guess you'll have links for that, but I've got, several social media things that I spend too much time on probably. So
No, you don't. It's all good stuff. Well, Dr. Baker, thank you so much for your time.
thanks, Raina. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining me today on this episode with Dr. Shawn Baker. If you'd like to know more information about how to get faster carnivore results, just head to the description of this episode, click on How to Get Faster Carnivore Results, open that up, and you'll see all the information there. Now, if you're learning from and enjoying these free episodes, please hit the subscribe button. That's an excellent zero-cost way to support what we do here on the Health Podcast. You can also find me on other social media accounts. I'm on Instagram and on Twitter under the name of the Primal Podcast. Now, if you love this episode with Dr. Shawn Baker, you'll also enjoy another episode I did with Dr. Stephanie Venn Watson. We spoke about the new cause of insulin resistance and why it's not just sugar and carbohydrates. It comes from a C15 deficiency. Now, that is a saturated fatty acid that is in butter and whole fat dairy, plus some other foods. Dr. Venn Watson will discuss C15 deficiency, how to fix it, and what foods you need to eat every single day. Finally, thank you for your interest in root cause healing, and I'll see you next week.